The cello hums low across the ballroom, its vibrations so deep it rattles the edge of my water glass. Somewhere behind me, violins thread through a Sinatra medley. Polished, perfect, practiced. Waiters move like shadows between tables. Laughter rises in little waves and falls again, smoothed out by the soft crush of money, candles, and corporate applause. Then a folded ivory envelope glides across my plate. Not tossed, not dropped, slid. The silver charger gleams beneath it. Her hand, manicured, controlled, disappears just as the scent of white gardenia drifts into my face. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to, because I already know. My name is Dana, I'm 56 years old, and this is how I turned my husband's last celebration into his first reckoning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The envelope feels thick in my hand. Warm from the lights, smooth like skin. For a moment, I think maybe I imagined it. Maybe she didn't just walk over here in full view of 3 Fortune 500 board members and hand me a note like we were in some high school lunchroom standoff. But when I unfold the card and read the handwriting, the orchestra stops. You deserve to know what he promised me tonight. That's all it says. But that sentence drips louder than the chandeliers, louder than champagne, louder than my heartbeat, which now sinks with the last sharp pluck of the cello string that dies mid-bar. The silence cuts like broken glass. Across from me, Harold, my husband of 28 years, pretends he didn't notice. His smile freezes just wide enough to show the crown on his molar. His tie is knotted in a perfect double Windsor. His retirement pin gleams on his lapel, issued by the same company where we met back in 1996. He doesn't look at me, which tells me everything. The moment folds in on itself like a slow implosion. Conversations trail off. Silverware hovers midair. A single waiter stands frozen with a bottle of Moët in one hand and nothing to pour it into anymore. The musicians murmur, uncertain, and I fold the note again, just once, and slide it into my clutch like I've done this before. Because I have. I knew about the secretary. Not everything, not until last month, but I'd known enough for a while now, enough to understand what kind of man my husband had quietly become when he thought no one was watching. There was a time I would have blamed myself. There was a time I did. When I convinced myself his late nights were just work and his cold silences were stress. I believed him the same way I believed in the company we helped build. Blindly, loyally, and to my own erasure. Back in Toledo, when we first moved into the little 2-bedroom with the carpet that smelled like lemon cleaner and old coffee, I worked as a bookkeeper. I put him through business school. I ran numbers while he ran meetings. I bought the suits he wore to impress the very people who now raise their glasses in his honor tonight. I sacrificed my career for his dreams. I knew the language of margin sheets better than most men in that room, but I was Dana, the wife. Not Dana, the partner. Not Dana, the one who caught the irregularity in the Q3 bonus disbursement chart last spring and started digging. I didn't say anything then, not when I saw the transition bonus allocated to a name I didn't recognize, not when I discovered the account was tied to a new LLC, not even when I saw it matched his secretary's initials, J.M. Jessica. She was barely 30, bright, professional, the kind of woman who wore silk blouses the color of bruises and knew how to stand close without touching. The kind of woman people underestimated until she smiled and the temperature in the room changed. I knew what he was doing, but more importantly, I knew what I was going to do. Because what Harold didn't know is that I'd been preparing for this gala far longer than he had. He thought tonight was about him, his legacy, his career, his retirement. But tonight is about the note he didn't write, the one I did, because that card wasn't from Jessica. It was from me. Slipped to her the day after I found the final digital transfer in our brokerage account, the one where he moved our joint stocks into a trust under her name. She didn't know at first. She was shocked when I showed her. Are you saying he used my name to move your shares? She asked me in the corner booth of a quiet diner outside town. Her hand shook. She wore no ring. Her lipstick was perfect except for one smudge on the straw of her iced tea. Me. I'm saying he planned to leave us both with nothing. Her. He promised me. He promised me too. She blinked. The sound of a bus braking outside filled the pause between us. It was the first real silence she'd had to sit in with me. The first moment I saw the woman beneath the perfection. Scared, betrayed, human. The deal I offered her wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was truth, scripted like a performance. I wrote the note myself, told her to deliver it on my cue, right after the third medley. And when she agreed, her voice was cold. Jessica. He'll know it was you. Me. Good. Now I sit in the glowing silence of the gala, surrounded by stunned executives and dimmed chandeliers. I feel his eyes finally glance toward me, just for a second, just enough. I press my napkin against my lips. I smile, because this isn't the end of the night. It's the beginning, and the orchestra hasn't even reached the crescendo yet. I didn't always know how to read betrayal. It starts soft, subtle, like background noise you mistake for silence. Like the hum of a fridge or the drip of a faucet you no longer hear until someone points it out. In our case, it was the late night emails that never made it to our shared computer. Small things first, little omissions. A calendar invite that never showed up. A meeting scheduled that I'd only learn about when he came home late and smelled faintly of citrus and another woman's shampoo. Then the second phone, which he called a backup. He carried it like a talisman, tucked low against the seam of his suit like a small animal he didn't want anyone to notice. And the smell of perfume I didn't wear. Once, twice, then again. On the collar of his gray coat. It settled in the fabric like proof. It lingered on his scarf. I'd find a stray lipstick mark on the coffee cup once. A thread of hair. Little ruins that kept arriving like postcards from a life I wasn't allowed to read. The first time I asked him directly, he looked me dead in the eye and laughed. Harold. Jesus, Dana. You sound paranoid. Me. I'm just asking. Harold. Well, stop. I work with young people. They wear cologne now, you know. It was such a clean lie. Practiced, smooth. That moment stayed with me longer than I wanted. Not because of what he said, but because of how easily he said it. Like I was the fool for noticing. Like noticing itself was an offense. We'd been married 28 years. And for most of those, I stood by him like scaffolding. He climbed. I held steady. I watched him rise through the company, from mid-level accounts to senior partner, then to regional VP. He brought me to dinners, then stopped. He introduced me to colleagues, then forgot. Eventually, I was just the plus one at our own life. But the first real crack in the wall came last Thanksgiving. He forgot to pick up the cranberry sauce. That might sound small, stupid even. But I'd made him a list, I'd printed it, highlighted the brands I liked, and when he came back from the store without it, again, I stared at the receipt like it had punched me. Not because of the cranberry, but because of the second bottle of wine. The expensive one I don't drink. And the gift bag came in. It took me a half hour to stop staring. The kitchen felt smaller that night, the overhead light too bright. The pale green backsplash showed every smear. He fell asleep in front of the Lions game with the remote in his hand. The TV glow made the room feel like an aquarium. I tiptoed past and climbed the stairs. I remember standing at the counter in our kitchen, in that quiet Toledo house with the pale green backsplash we never remodeled, and thinking, I'm being erased. That night, after dinner, I went upstairs while he fell asleep. I had to move without drama, like a thief of time. I opened his office drawer, not the top one. He was smarter than that. I checked the third one down, behind the pile of old tax envelopes and a manila folder stamped with last year's W-2s. That's where I found the printed transaction summary. $142,000. Redirected stock options. Labeled. Legacy transfer. The beneficiary name, J. Marwick. Jessica. It wasn't a bonus, it was theft. The shares were mine too. Bought early before the company IPO'd. Filed under joint marital assets. But here he was, moving them into a separate LLC, one I hadn't known existed. The paper looked ordinary, white, typed, but the implication felt like a hand closing around my throat. At first, I thought it was a shell. Then I realized it was worse. It was hers. She wasn't just the affair. She was the vault. I sleepwalked that weekend, folded laundry with my mind on the paper. I watched the kettle boil without seeing steam. I held the transaction summary like a little detonator, turning it over and over to see if there was a serial number I missed. I called the brokerage under the guise of an account question, 2 calls, 3 calls, and listened to automated voices give me dates and timestamps. I printed every email I could find. I archived the statements. That weekend, I met with a lawyer in Cleveland. Her name was Rosa, a former corporate litigator who smelled like peppermint and moved like a bulldog in heels. When I walked into her office, the leather chairs had that new patina smell. The room was lined with books with titles about fiduciary duty and trust law. Rosa had the kind of voice that made you want to confess things you hadn't yet done. I handed her everything, the documents, the statements, the paper trail. She spread them out on her desk like a cartographer arranging maps. Rosa. He's clever, but not clever enough. She showed me how to build the timeline, how to collect call logs, how to record without tipping my hand. She gave me the language I needed: asset protection, trust redirection, marital estate segmentation. Words. Harold never thought I'd learn. Rosa taught me about the quiet power of paperwork, how signatures are small, turnstile moments, how an LLC can be a shell or a coffin depending on how you treat it. She told me how to speak to bankers so they'd hear me as owner and not as a curious spouse. She made me fill out forms I had never imagined filling. She made me sign my maiden name with the same care I'd once used to sign birthday cards. Then Rosa leaned across the desk and asked me one question I'll never forget. Rosa, do you want revenge or do you want results? Me, both. There's a lying speed to revenge stories. They read like fireworks, big, bright, obvious. I wanted something else. I wanted a slow flame, steady, hot, that consumes the ladder before the show ends. I wanted the legal kind of humiliation, the sort that turns statements into evidence and friendships into witnesses. I wanted him exposed in a way that could not be folded back into apology. The plan grew slow and methodical. First, I opened a private trust under my maiden name. Then I transferred our joint property into it, starting with the condo in Traverse City, followed by the retirement annuities. I met with a trust officer who smelled faintly of talc and wore conservative pearls. We signed in a small room with a clock that made the seconds feel like tiny knocks. I changed account beneficiaries. I retitled property. I sat at a kitchen table surrounded by stamps and envelopes and did the work of reclaiming what had been legally mine for years. Bankers asked awkward questions. He answered for me in one of our many conversations, never thinking I was the one moving the pieces. He never noticed. He was too busy planning his gala. Harold had wanted it to be a black tie event. Not just a party, Dana, he'd said, a statement, a legacy. His team booked the ballroom at the Blackstone Hotel in Chicago, top floor. Gold accented everything, an orchestra flown in from Cincinnati. They sent invitations printed on heavy cardstock with our shared name at the top like some coronation. It was supposed to be his curtain call, so I made it mine, but I needed one final piece, Jessica. She was sharper than I expected, the kind of woman who kept her nails short and her answers shorter. When I approached her, quietly, respectfully, I didn't come to accuse her. I came to recruit her. Our first meeting wasn't dramatic. No fury, no accusations. Just a booth at a diner 2 exits outside of Toledo, off I-75, where the coffee was bitter and the jukebox was a faded machine. The vinyl creaked when the waitress slid by. She wore no makeup. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun like she hadn't slept. There was a bruise of tiredness under her eyes that no silk blouse could hide. Jessica. I didn't know about the shares. Me. Now you do. Jessica. Why are you telling me this? Me. Because he'll burn us both. You just don't know it yet. She listened. I watched her small movements, how she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, how she kept her fingers wrapped around a chipped coffee mug like it steadied her. She was not the villain I'd imagined. She was someone who had been given an illusion. That was the moment her eyes shifted. Like something clicked that had been waiting too long to settle. She agreed. Later, she told me that she had been scared, that she had trusted promises because they came coated in compliments and dinners, that she had believed a man who used the word partner and never meant it for both. I told her about the note, about the moment, about how and when she'd deliver it. Jessica, you want me to slide it across your plate? Me, at exactly 8:17 p.m. after the second medley. Jessica, why so specific? Me, because that's when the lights dim for the tribute video. The orchestra pauses and everyone's watching. Jessica, he's going to lose it. Me, No, he's going to realize it's over. We practiced the timing in my head for weeks, rehearsed the exact angle of her approach, the tilt of the envelope. I told her to wear the blouse he favored. I wanted him to recognize her scent as something familiar so the shock would be sharper. I wanted the delivery to read like a breach of etiquette rather than a scream. People notice breaches of etiquette. They point. They remember. I wrote the note myself that night, on cream stationery from the same set we used for our wedding thank yous. The ink was dark blue. I used my nicest pen. It felt almost ceremonial, the way I pressed the nib down to make the letters heavy in the places that needed weight. You deserve to know what he promised me tonight. I sealed it. I handed it to her in a plain envelope at the parking lot outside the diner. The street lamps were the color of old pennies. She slipped it into her purse like a contract. Before she walked away, she looked at me. Jessica, you're not going to walk out of there and leave him to apologize, are you? Me. No. I'm going to make sure everyone hears the apology he never thought to write. And when she walked away, I didn't feel hate. I felt ready. There's a different kind of patience in planning a reckoning. It's not the impatience of someone who wants to strike first. It's the patience of someone who has rearranged the furniture in a house so the light will fall just so when the guest arrives. It's the patience of small, careful moves, signatures, beneficiary forms, quiet meetings with lawyers who keep their expressions neutral, the long, boring work of making your rights visible on paper. I slept differently after that. My dreams were tight and economical. I woke with lists in my head. I made calls at odd hours. I printed confirmations and filed them in a new folder labeled with a date I'd never felt was necessary before. I had built the scaffolding. Now I only had to pull it away, piece by piece, at the right time. There's a silence that comes after grief that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like forgetting how to breathe in a room you built with your own hands. That's what the weeks after that diner meeting felt like. Not rage, not devastation, just the dull ache of clarity. Days slowed into repetition. The kettle hissed in the mornings. The clock over the fridge ticked too loudly. The smell of old coffee clung to the air. Every corner of the house felt heavy, like a place that remembered too much. I stopped cooking dinner. We stopped sitting at the same table. I took my coffee to the porch in the mornings, even in the cold, bundled in Harold's old sweater that still smelled faintly of his cologne. He'd nod on his way out the door, briefcase in hand, pretending everything was fine. But I wasn't his wife anymore, not in any way that mattered. He'd already replaced me, financially, emotionally, even legally. I was the last to know, and maybe the only one who didn't lie about it. So I stopped lying too. I started printing everything: emails, transfer records, employee, stock option logs, receipts he thought I never saw. I even dug into the company's annual report. Harold had always assumed I didn't read those, but I did. Every page, every sterile paragraph. I sat at the dining table with a highlighter and a glass of red wine, combing through fine print until my eyes blurred. Every footnote told a story. Every redirect buried in line items under executive incentives was a breadcrumb, and that's where I found it. A single line marked Advisory Retention Disbursement, tied to an entity listed as JM Consulting. Jessica didn't even have a consulting license. It was a fake company, a paper shell designed to shuffle money from the corporate bonus pool directly into her hands without raising flags. Until I saw it. Until I matched the federal EIN on that file with the LLC I'd already found in Harold's drawer. It hit like static, the kind that fills your ears right before lightning strikes. He hadn't just cheated. He'd robbed me and the company some to fund his retirement and his mistress, and he was about to walk out under chandeliers and applause, holding a crystal plaque engraved with the words, "For your lifetime of service." No, not without consequence. I called Rosa again. Her voice came through the line crisp and level, the way it always did when she was already a step ahead. Me, is this fraud? Rosa, not if they signed off on it, but if the board didn't know, then yes, potentially. Me, what if I show them? Rosa, then you better be damn sure you do it right, or they'll circle wagons to protect him. Her tone had no sympathy, just strategy. I liked that, so I planned. I spent 2 weeks building a visual trail, printed documents, screenshots, notarized filings. I bought a heavy 3-ring binder and filled it with tabs like a war map, dates, signatures, wire transfers. I built a paper trail sharp enough to draw blood. And then I found something else, a resignation letter from 4 years ago, filed quietly by Harold's previous assistant, Marlene, a woman I barely remembered, except for the way she always brought the same lunch, boiled eggs and wheat toast, the smell of vinegar from her little container of pickles. She had a small laugh, nervous and genuine, and she used to compliment my scarves. She left suddenly. No real explanation. Harold said she wasn't a culture fit. Until I found her name again on an old HR portal buried under archived employee files, and dialed the number still attached to her emergency contact. My hand trembled a little when I pressed call. Me. Hi, this is Dana, Harold's wife. There was a pause. Long enough that I thought she might hang up. Marlene. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Her voice was soft but heavy, like someone who'd rehearsed that sentence for years. She invited me to meet her in a diner outside South Bend. The drive was long and gray. Rain spat against the windshield, thin and cold. I stopped once at a gas station just to calm down, washed my hands twice, stared at myself in the restroom mirror, trying to remember who exactly I was walking in there as. Wife? Investigator? Survivor? The diner looked like every diner in the Midwest. Silver coffee pots, cracked vinyl booths, the faint hum of an old jukebox that hadn't worked since the 90s. She sat near the window, back straight, eyes tired but clear. Marlene. He promised me a promotion, said I'd be running admin ops by the end of the year. Then he froze me out, started using Jessica instead. Me. Did you know about the stock? Marlene. I knew about the dinners, the gifts, but I didn't know he'd go that far. I nodded. I didn't push, just let the silence do the talking. She looked down at her coffee, stirring it long after the sugar dissolved. Me. Would you be willing to say that on record? She looked up then, meeting my eyes for the first time. Marlene. For you? Absolutely. The words landed like air after drowning. I don't think I cried until I got back in the car, not because of what she said, but because someone finally believed me. Someone else had been hurt, and she wasn't afraid to admit it. I sat behind the wheel with the wipers smearing the rain into gray streaks and just breathed, slow and uneven. When I handed Rosa the signed statement, she smiled, a hard, slow smile. Rosa, that's your hammer. Time to build the gallows. The next phase unfolded like choreography. I coordinated everything with the company's PR director, Lila, a woman who had always nodded politely at parties but never quite looked me in the eye. She was the kind of person who thrived in the gray space between secrets and spin. This time, she looked straight at me. Lila. If you want this to land, I need the documents 2 hours before the tribute begins. No copies. Originals. Me. You'll have them. Lila. Why are you doing this now? Me. Because I was silent too long. She didn't argue. She just nodded once. A small gesture, but one that carried weight. The week of the gala, I moved out. I told Harold I was going early to help with seating charts. He didn't blink, didn't even look up from his laptop. Good thinking, honey, he said, half distracted, typing something I would later find out was a wire authorization. The irony almost made me laugh. I packed what mattered, documents, clothes, one framed photo of my parents from before their divorce. I left behind the rest. The curated life we'd built like a showroom. Chicago felt colder that week. The wind came in off the lake and cut through the city like glass. I stayed at a friend's apartment. Emily, a quiet graphic designer who didn't ask questions. She let me have the guest room. Each night, I sat on the edge of the bed, rehearsing lines in the mirror. Not for a toast, for a eulogy. Not of a man's life, but of his lies. I practiced how my voice would sound, calm even. I practiced where to pause, when to look up. I imagined the faces in the crowd, the gasp before the silence. I rehearsed the moment I would no longer flinch. The night of the gala, the city glowed. Taxis lined the curb outside the Blackstone. Valets moved in black coats like shadows. Inside, chandeliers threw gold over polished marble. The sound of conversation bounced between champagne glasses. I wore black, not out of mourning, out of clarity, a sleeveless sheath dress. Simple, sharp, no jewelry except the bracelet he gave me on our 10th anniversary, the one engraved with always. Always is such a foolish word. It implies permanence in a world that trades everything. I remember looking at myself in the mirror of the hotel restroom before walking in. My lipstick was steady. My hands weren't. I could hear the orchestra warming up through the walls, violins tuning, the faint buzz of anticipation. At 8:12 p.m., the second medley began. I stood near the edge of the ballroom, the scent of white lilies and champagne mixing with the faint tang of expensive perfume. The lights dimmed slightly as servers began refilling glasses. Across the room, Jessica waited by the bar, posture too perfect to be relaxed. She wore navy blue, her hair pinned low. Her lips, that same shade of silent apology, parted slightly when she saw me watching. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. At 8:17, as planned, she moved. Her heels clicked softly across the marble, a rhythm I could count in my pulse. The orchestra swelled. Waiters cleared dessert plates. A camera flash went off somewhere near the dais. Jessica's hand extended. The ivory envelope slid across my plate, gliding over silver. She stepped back, silent, deliberate. Her eyes flicked towards me. Not fear, not pity. Just understanding. Harold never saw her do it. He was too busy soaking in the applause. Smiling, waving, holding court in his final act. I looked at him, then down at the note. The room blurred for a second, sound dropping away until all I could hear was the low hum of the chandelier lights. My fingers felt the paper, soft, warm from the candles, the faint texture of the stationery pressing against my skin. I opened it, let the silence bloom. And then I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Silence already had the room by the throat. It was the kind of silence that crackles. Heavy, electric. The pause before a building storm. Every chandelier shimmered, trembling slightly with the low hum of the speakers as the orchestra paused for the tribute video. That was my cue. The exact moment planned down to the second. Behind me, the projector flickered to life, casting Harold's smiling face in black and white across the ballroom screen. The crowd shifted as images slid past. Harold shaking hands, cutting ribbons, giving speeches. A lifetime condensed into corporate nostalgia, but I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at Dorian Vale, the board chair. A man who wore old money like a cologne, smooth, cold, unbothered. He was seated 2 places to Harold's left, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin, unaware that his evening was about to turn into a boardroom crime scene. I turned toward him, calm as smoke. Me. "Excuse me, Dorian. Before the slideshow continues, I have something for you." Every head nearby turned, subtle, instinctive. Dorian's eyes flicked toward me, surprised but polite. He half smiled, expecting a toast, maybe a sentimental letter. Instead, I held out the manila envelope. Thick, bound, sealed with a red tab. He hesitated before taking it. His fingers brushed mine, barely, and I could feel the pulse of confusion behind his measured expression. He weighed its heft, thumbed the edge, then pulled the tab under the low shimmer of chandelier light. It took him all of 10 seconds to realize what he was holding. Timeline, transfers, signatures, beneficiary name, Jessica Marwick. His jaw flexed. The skin around his temple went tight. "Dorian, is this..." Me. "Company stock. Transferred illegally. Without board approval." Dorian. "Dana..." Me. "He used her LLC to drain our marital assets. He used your platform to launder the trust." A pin could have dropped and sounded like a gunshot. The lights clicked fully off as the tribute video advanced. The room dimmed to black, but the next image never appeared. Instead, the projector froze. Harold's face mid-laugh, his mouth a perfect O of arrogance. A technical glitch. No one moved to fix it, because Dorian stood up. "Dorian, stop the projector. Lights up." His voice didn't boom. It didn't have to. Command wrapped around every syllable like wire. The staff hesitated, unsure, then obeyed. The lights rose, and I turned to face the room. Me. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you came to honor a legacy, but sometimes legacies need correction." The collective inhale was almost beautiful. Hundreds of lungs drawing in at once, the ballroom shrinking under the weight of anticipation. Harold finally looked at me, truly looked, the smile gone. The performative calm replaced by confusion, then fear. Harold. "Dana, what are you doing?" Me. "What you told me never to do. speaking. A murmur rippled through the tables like wind through wheat. Gold cufflinks glinted. Forks hit china. The sound of expensive discomfort filled the air. Jessica stood motionless near the bar, her face unreadable. Not guilty, not smug, just done. Me. My husband diverted over 6 figures in company stock into a private account under an employee's name. That employee resigned today. Gasps, real ones, the human kind. Not the polite murmurs of gossip, but the raw intake of disbelief. Me. This transition bonus was never board approved. The consulting firm listed doesn't exist, and the trust it was funneled through, that's ours, mine. Opened in both our names before he scrubbed mine off. I felt the words land like stones thrown into still water, each ripple reaching another table, another whisper. Harold's face drained of color. He reached for the mic like it could save him. Harold, this is a misunderstanding. Me, don't. Harold, Dana, me, don't talk to me like I'm your secretary. The line cut through him. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He tried to stand. I took one small step forward. Me, sit down. And he did. For the first time in years, he obeyed me. The orchestra remained silent. Bows lowered, instruments idle. A symphony of stillness. Me. While Harold was planning this gala, I was in court, transferring all remaining marital assets into a protected trust. Effective yesterday, including the Traverse City condo, including the joint annuities. Murmurs rippled. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," near the dessert table. Another voice said, "She filed already?" Then a slow clap from the back. One person, then another. Not mockery. Recognition. It spread softly, unsure at first, then steady. I let it fade. Me. This isn't revenge. This is restitution. And this isn't just personal. It's financial misconduct, documented, time-stamped, and handed to your board chair tonight. I gestured toward Dorian. He raised the envelope, confirming it silently, a gesture both legal and lethal. Jessica moved closer, heels whispering against marble, not to gloat, but to stand, her posture firm. Jessica. He lied to me, too. I cooperated fully. The note was hers. She pointed toward me. Jessica. Not mine. Harold looked at her like he didn't recognize her, like he was seeing a stranger he'd built from lies and finally realized couldn't save him. The silence stretched again, elastic and brutal, and then came the final blow. Me. I had your retirement speech draft printed. I left it on your desk. He blinked, confused. Harold. So? Me. You titled it Legacy and Loyalty. How poetic, considering neither belonged to you. A few people laughed, nervous, tight laughter that broke tension without offering comfort. I turned back to my seat. The distance between us felt longer than any aisle I'd ever walked. The orchestra's instruments gleamed faintly in the corner like ghosts of restraint. I reached my chair, picked up my champagne flute, and held it just high enough. Me. To endings and beginnings. My hand didn't shake. For a second, no one moved. The entire room hovered in that strange vacuum between horror and awe. Then the conductor, a gray-haired man with sharp eyes, finally lifted his baton. He looked at me once, just once, like he knew. But instead of resuming the Sinatra medley, he paused, adjusted his cuffs, and raised his arm. The first note that followed wasn't swing or celebration. It was Rachmaninoff, sharp, cold, dramatic, the kind of music that doesn't ask for applause. It demands reverence. Perfect. People began to whisper again, but softer now. Staff leaned into earpieces, eyes darting toward Dorian and Harold. Dorian pulled out his phone, made a quiet call. The hotel manager appeared at the edge of the room, uncertain whether to escort or assist. Jessica turned and walked out, her heels striking the marble like punctuation marks. Harold just sat there, statue still, jaw clenched, lip twitching. The lights carved hard edges into his face. He looked smaller somehow, the grandeur stripped away. Me? I didn't move. I let the music play this time, because it was mine now. Every chord, every rest, every note of unraveling. I could feel my pulse syncing with the piano's rhythm, that haunting precision, that slow build toward something irreversible. The Rachmaninoff piece swelled until it filled the entire ballroom, pressing against the walls like an exorcism. Somewhere, a waiter dropped a tray. No one turned. All eyes were still on Harold. He stared at the tablecloth, not at me, not at the envelope, not at the life collapsing in front of him. Just the tablecloth, as if maybe, if he looked hard enough, he could find a version of the world where I hadn't stood up. But that world didn't exist anymore. It never did. The applause didn't come at the end of the piece. Just silence. A respectful, almost fearful quiet. The kind you get when the truth finally fills the air and everyone knows it can't be taken back. The headlines came faster than I expected. Retiring VP implicated in internal audit probe. Whistleblower tip triggers board investigation on Blackstone Gala night. Legacy or liability. The morning after the gala, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing against the nightstand. News alerts, voicemails, missed calls. The world had already moved faster than I could breathe. I didn't give interviews. I didn't need to. The footage spoke louder than I ever could. The moment Harold tried to speak and I stopped him. The way Dorian stood, pale and rigid. The orchestra's silence hanging like judgment in the air. Jessica's calm confession echoing across the ballroom. They played it first on the local evening news in Toledo, then again on a national segment the following week. I watched it once. Just once. I sat in Emily's apartment, curled in an armchair with a blanket pulled over my knees. The TV's cold glow painted the room in soft blue. My tea had gone cold on the table beside me. The anchor's voice was syrupy, rehearsed, the kind that makes tragedy sound like programming. But when I saw myself standing there in black, unflinching under the lights, I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just watched the woman on screen finally say what needed to be said. That woman had my face, my voice, my steady breath, but she felt like someone else. Someone who'd stepped out from under a shadow and never looked back. After that, things move quickly. Corporate timelines are merciless when they smell blood. Harold was placed on temporary administrative leave pending a full audit, but the damage was already done. The board couldn't risk keeping him. They didn't even wait for the findings. He resigned due to health reasons 3 days later. The resignation came with a quiet stipulation. No pension, no severance, no ceremony, just a press release. I didn't even get a copy. I saw it online like everyone else. One paragraph, polite, forgettable, the kind of statement meant to bury a scandal beneath bureaucratic language. Jessica disappeared from the company roster the same week. I heard she moved to Denver. A rumor from one of Rosa's contacts said she'd taken a new job in compliance. She sent me a short email a few weeks later. Subject line, "Thank you." Message, "For telling me before he ruined me too. I didn't know who I was working for. Now I do. No signature, no return address beyond the automatic footer. She never asked for forgiveness. I respected her more for that." Harold didn't come home after the gala. Instead, he sent his lawyer. A man in a charcoal suit knocked on my door 3 days later and handed me a thick envelope that smelled faintly of printer ink and stale air, divorce papers, bitter and bloated. But Rosa had already prepared the counter filings. She was efficient like that. We didn't fight. There was nothing left to fight for. He tried to keep the Traverse City condo. Rosa. "It's under your name. He has no legal claim." Her voice was almost tender when she said it. Not comfort exactly, but validation. The kind of tone women reserve for each other when justice finally tilts the right way. I signed the final documents on a quiet Tuesday morning, the same day the tulips bloomed out front, the same day the piano tuner came. Funny, the small things that still mattered. The air smelled like dust and spring. The piano tuner hummed softly as he worked, an old man with kind eyes who never asked questions. Each key he struck felt like a punctuation mark to an old chapter. When he left, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I used to pack Harold's lunches in the early 2000s. Ham sandwich, apple, note tucked inside that said, "Good luck today." I could still see the faint knife marks on the wood from when I used to slice vegetables for dinner back when we still cooked together. Now the table held only a mug of Earl Grey in a folder, a new one, embossed in gold. The Evelyn Foundation, established in memory of strength. That's what I named it, after my mother, after the woman who used to tell me, a quiet woman isn't weak, she's just choosing where to place her thunder. The foundation was my thunder. Grants for women returning to the workforce after financial abuse. scholarships for administrative professionals with nowhere to turn, a quarterly newsletter featuring anonymous survivor stories, stories that sounded too much like mine. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Paperwork became peace. Each notarized page, each grant form, each bank routing number, all of it a reconstruction of self. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady. One night, about a month after everything settled, I returned to the Gala ballroom. They were hosting a spring charity auction. New banners, fresh flowers. The same chandeliers glittered above, but the crowd was different. Fewer tuxedos, more laughter. The energy had changed. I arrived early, before most of the guests. I walked through the lobby in silence, the scent of polished wood and gardenias stirring old memories. When I stepped into the ballroom, the orchestra was tuning again. A different conductor this time. Younger, brighter, the kind of man who smiled between movements. The lights shimmered across the marble floor, and for a moment I saw the ghosts of that night. The frozen faces, the broken silence, my own shadow rising from the chair. I walked to the far end of the room, fingers trailing along the edge of a tablecloth. The linen was new, crisp, unwrinkled. My reflection flickered in the silver chargers. One of the waiters recognized me. "Waiter, you're the lady from the video, right?" I looked up. His face was young, earnest, maybe 25. Me. Depends on the video. He smiled, small, knowing. Nodded toward the small stage. Waiter. Whatever that was. It was the most powerful thing I've ever seen someone do without shouting. Me. Funny. I didn't say anything new. I just said it in public. He nodded again, like he understood something bigger than the words. Then he walked away. That night, the orchestra played the same Sinatra medley from before, but I heard it differently. No longer a farewell, no longer a curtain call, just music. The same melody that once marked the end of my marriage now marked the beginning of something else. I stayed until the last note faded. The applause rose around me. Light, genuine, unscripted. I left quietly, unnoticed, my heels clicking against marble, in rhythm with the fading song. My house is quieter now, but it's mine. The hum of the refrigerator, the kettle's whistle, the creak of the stair. Each sound belongs to me again. Some nights, I still light the same candle I had burning the night of the gala. White wax, faint citrus scent. I sit by the window and read letters from women I've never met. They find me. They always do. Strangers who say they saw the video, read the article, followed the story. They don't say, "I'm sorry." They say, "Me too." They say, "Thank you." They say, "I thought I was the only one." And I tell them the truth. You're not. You never were. You were just taught to clap for someone else's legacy. But you can write your own. So that's what I did. And that's why I'm here. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.